The road is quiet, the stars align, numbers whisper, roots that shine. Every signal, every sign points to the heart we're meant to find. Let the data draw the map, let the wheels of insight.
You are listening to the Innovation Forge, the #1 podcast on adaptive enrollment management, exploring the data, marketing, and strategy that fuels higher education. Here's your host, David Dysart.
Hello, Guilders, and welcome to another episode of the Innovation Forge. I am your host, David Dysart, and I'm thrilled you're joining me on this journey into the innovative world of higher education and adaptive enrollment management. Welcome, Guilder, to the Forgeworks Grimoire, a guided journey through the artifacts, personas, and practitioner wisdom shaping the future of enrollment strategy. I am David Dysart, and in each episode, we light the forge around a new chapter of the student journey, not just to observe it, but to build for it. From behavioral streaks to counselor workflows, email triggers to aid thresholds, this isn't just feature engineering, it's feature storytelling. With every filter and join, we're crafting a clearer, smarter, and more human student experience. So whether you're a Slate right, a strategist, or still finding your place in the Grimoire, let's see how Quorum scoring takes shape today. Today, we are in the time of strategy, when tools are sharpened and vision takes form before the first spark of outreach. Next, we draw the topic, today's artifact of attention. This episode focuses on planning. We harness the powers of Scout to better plan travel with our practitioner work here and Quorum scoring. The third card, the Practitioner, reveals our guide today. We learn more from the Datamancer, who reads ecospherical data like runes of context. And finally, the one we serve. The student persona drawn from the deck today is out-of-state Oliver, whose geography and patterns shape your travel map. You might remember Oliver from our first Forgeworks Grimoire training. He is showing up yet again, as a low mist curls across the forge floor, as the coals glow with a pale wandering light. The hammer rests silent, weathered map unfurls itself upon the anvil, its edges flickering like candle flames. From the shadowed corner steps the Datamancer, robes brushed with the dust of 1,000 highways. A compass of brass and crystal swings from his wrist and sings with a tone only data can hear. He sets the compass upon the map and watches as symbols of cities and schools flare to life. Each spark marks a place where students gather in curiosity. Their journey's not yet written. The Datamancer speaks in a voice that carries both mystery and method. Travel is not a guess. It's a pattern waiting to be revealed. We'll trace the rhythm of organizations and zip codes, measure the hum of conversation, and listen for the quiet pulse of engagement. The forge grows warmer as lines of light bind each spark into pathways. The Quorum Insights Engine awakens, and the map becomes a living script of where your recruiters will find their next class. Tonight, you will learn to let data draw the itinerary and to meet students where their journey begins. And the student we focus on today, out-of-state Oliver, Oliver's from just far enough away that you're not sure if he's serious or just browsing. His address changes mid-cycle. Did he move? Is he using his cousin's zip for merit aid? He opens every travel email, but can you tell if your visit made it to his actual radar? Quorum scoring has become one of my favorite things. In my first book, The Innovation Forge, Engagement Scoring and Predictive Modeling in the Slate CRM, I demonstrated a report to help you identify schools where you outperformed or underperformed based off of the students at the school, what kind of yield volumes we're getting versus predicted yield, until I had a conversation with Eric Hoffpower, and he described work that he was doing with quorum sensing, and essentially identifying schools that you're not traveling to, or you're not holding events at, but you have a high enough volume or high enough engagement in your student records to suggest, hey, let's plan a visit here. And that is definitely that missing bridge that I needed to get from where I was doing with scout recruiting from the book to this much fuller identification of schools through quorum scoring. So that is an incomprehensibly large thank you to Eric for sharing his work in brilliance with the community. Today, we will be building a quorum score as well as some quorum personas that can help guide how you plan your recruitment travel, as well as engage with organizations and identify similar organizations to leverage those untapped markets. This could also be done with zip codes or geo markets, any kind of contextual base that you're using to aggregate your student populations. And today I'm just in another clean slate environment from the last couple of Forgeworks Grimoires that we've done. As you can see, I have a naming convention that I'm a fan of. It's Insight Engines. And yeah, we don't need a particular folder. For joins, we're going to use our records, and we'll go to the person base. And there's lots of preloaded data here in this clean slate environment. So we want to just be able to aggregate our student data across that central point, whether that's organizations, zip codes, geomarkets. So we're just going to pull a few different data points, and we're going to do most of this work in Excel. I had initially tried to do this with like independent subqueries and a report or kind of an export-import process. And I just took too long, wasn't really getting me the results that I actually wanted to achieve. So we're going to work with this data in Excel. So we're going to pull the name, or not the name of the student, the ID of the student, SEEB code for their school, rank 1. You could do this by level, however you're identifying that source school from the student. And we just want to know, were they an inquiry? And we can just do an existence. And we will go as quickly as humanly possible through this so we can have plenty of time to work in Excel. And I guess I could do it in prospect first. I think we can do a literal for a prospect. Let me just do status. Exists. Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna name that prospect. And then we'll do another one, inquiry. So we want to get these groups are not going to be mutually exclusive. We just want to know if they existed at each of these levels. And then if they were an applicant, because we're going to look at volumes of records at this aggregate level, but we're also going to look at conversion rates, and we're also going to look at engagement metrics as well. And then I just do an enrolled, and then we'll do another one for admit. They don't have a status for that, which is fair. I don't have a status for that in any instance of Slate that I've ever worked in either. So that might not be true of any instance, but typically I don't. I feel like, do we have a decision most recent? No. We'll do a dependent subquery and just do they probably have that in. Oh, they don't. If I actually need to join to, if I joined to application, that would probably get me there. And you'd probably want to do a little bit more work on this, like applicant, because people could be applying across multiple terms or multiple programs. But we're just trying to keep this pretty simple and quick. I thought they had a common export. Did they not? I guess they don't. Fascinating. So we just want to essentially capture that this was a confirmed decision, in case you're kind of working with these students in between decision being confirmed and released. This is going to be rank, though. I don't want rank, because that would just be like the most recent. I guess I can just do, since we're alive, and I've already spent entirely too much time on getting an admit export. Okay. And this should essentially get us what we need if we're just looking at volume. Oh, let's see, do I have an engagement score field here? I do. We're just going to look at engagement score as well. And we can aggregate that at that quorum level as well. And let's look at a smaller group of records. We're going to do today minus 10 to get some test records in there. And they might not actually be attached to schools, though. Yeah, I'll do the whole whatever they have in this test. So we're just going to run this. Query here. And we'll export. Yeah, that happened pretty quickly. Oh, man. Okay, they do have some schools. Okay. Just needed some seed codes to make the formulas work. Would have been very convenient. Looks like we do have some of that. So we're going to open up this Excel document. And what we're going to do is look at these under the umbrella of our school codes. So we have a lot of seed codes here. And we'll just do this as our organizations. And we'll just copy all of these seed codes. There will be some duplicates, so we'll go over to data. We're going to remove those duplicates so that we get a clean record. Yeah, we have 860. Yeah, this is a very nicely put together test data set in the clean slate. Way to go, Technolutions. Love it. And maybe we just do 2 header rows here. And these are going to be volume. And prospect, inquiry, app, admit, enrolled. So some basic Excel formulas are just helpful, I find, when you're doing data analysis. You don't always have as much flexibility in Slate. So we're just going to count ifs. So we're going to count. You can also do a sum if, since I have these as ones. So we're just going to count if that column data is 1. Now we're also going to assign this specifically. Maybe we just do a couple of contextual rows up here. So this is going to be essentially your total, and maybe this is blanks. So we can copy this formula, and we're going to add another criteria here. And we want to know specifically how many prospects when the school code equals this. And a fun trick, just double click that little green box in the bottom right hand of your cell. That will drag the formula down. It sometimes gets a little stuck sometimes, so you don't necessarily always want to trust that it works. And because we're just trying to see what blinks, it looks like we had a lot of blinks. So instead of a dynamic reference to the cell, we're just going to have a couple quotation marks. So the vast majority of our student records don't have school 1 codes or seed codes and their first school on their school data table. But we do have a lot of data here. So now we can pull this because the columns are also going to move over, we want to make sure that we're anchoring our references. So we always want to be referencing column B when we're looking at our seed codes. Similarly, we want to do like a window F4 that anchors with the $signs our school code column. And we do genuinely want to pull over the others though. So you can see this is looking for column B, so that seed code still matches, and it's looking for exports in column G, which is our enrolling. So we're getting counts across each of our organizations of how many prospects, how many inquiries, how many apps, how many admitted students, and how many enrolling students are at each of these schools. And we can also just bring this up if we want. And just make sure we're getting our baselines here. Find and replace might have actually been faster, but here we are. So we do have live data across all 5 of our statuses. So we have our volume, and we also want to maybe look at what is the average engagement. So we're going to do an average ifs. So we're going to average our person engagement score. And again, we want to reference this seed code. So we'll just click the B in that column. Comma allows you to just separate each of these data import endpoints. And let's do this at each of these prospect levels as well. Let's see if this is actually a problem with my formula. It might be. Oh no, I mean, I'm just dividing by 0 because there probably just isn't engagement. Oh, there's some engagement score in there for my test data. So we're going to lock down our engagement score column. We're going to lock down our, that was probably the problem there. We're going to lock down that seed code reference to just the column, not the row. And we'll leave that as something that I can pull over. And let's just create a filter. Okay, that's working. That's just a lot of dividing by 0, so like my formulas are going to error out. So I just added that if error. So if the result is an error, then just give me a placeholder text. And I can just look at each of these columns. And this is a not very robust data set on the engagement scoring, but I do see some engagement scores here. So on average, the school has, the prospects at the school have an average engagement score of 60. So then we can start looking at, you could look at enrollment likelihood, but I also just want to look at actual conversion rates. And you're going to get some of this just with like the volume, but I want to look more specifically because I think it's a good data point to have. What are your prospect to inquiry conversion rates, inquiry to app, app to accept, accept to enroll? And I think those are standalone data points that can be very valuable in understanding. It also helps us with the persona pieces in a little bit as well, as you seeing either low volume, high conversion means you need to do what you can to increase your applicant pool or increase your prospect pool at that school because they do convert very highly. And what we really start looking at is, let's just put this together. So and I can make this header a little bit larger so we can actually see what we're doing. App to admit, and then just admit to enroll. And you could also do like a gross enroll, and you do like matriculation, but we're just going to look at those different conversion points. And again, we'll just do an if error, and we're going to divide our inquiries by our prospects. And it would help if I actually give if I gave a fallback value to that. So we can see 50%, but it's 50% of a very low volume and 80% of a higher volume. So we're starting to see how these different data points are able to offer context, but they're all puzzle pieces into the broader quorum image. And perhaps you wanted to weight conversion higher than volume or volume higher than conversion. We're going to do that in a minute, because we're going to start actually building out, I think the kind of what I have found to be like a good balance of simple but effective is looking at your prospect pool at these quorum levels and identifying your quintiles. So what's the first, second, third, fourth, fifth quintiles of volumes and conversion rates, engagement metrics. So we're just going to do quintiles, volume, and we're just going to do quintile conversion. And we don't need these extra columns. So, but we do need some personas. And maybe we're just going to do, and I guess we could have we don't have enough engagement volume to do quintiles off of engagement. So we'll skip that for now, especially for just time, because I think we are already 25 minutes into this. I think I started around 3:15 Pacific. So we'll just do our personas starting here. Maybe do like a high volume, low, just low yield. Maybe that's our focus, is specific elements of our conversion. And maybe we want to do high volume, let's do low volume. I think that's more interesting to identify those. And then high conversion. We'll just do full conversion. If I could actually type, literally, if I could type anything at all while doing a live video, and even not live video, terrible typer. So yeah, those are just going to be the two of those kind of personas that we're going to look at the moment. So let's build out, not necessarily want filters working on this. And we're going to have to first identify what the quintiles are. Then we can write formulas that allow us to apply. And there's probably a much better way to apply a quintile than what this formula is. I just haven't taken the time to figure it out. So prospect, inquiry, app, admit, enroll, and then convert. We're going to skip. I'm going to skip engagement for now, just because it's such a small subsection of the test records that have it. And I'll just copy these from over here. You can also just do a dynamic reference as well, so you could just like, oh, I just want this to be exactly. So if I do rename those cells, these cells will be renamed as well. And I would recommend like adding some color coding up here just to visually not make this as wild to look at. So I've been doing quintiles for this, but you could do quartiles, you do deciles, you do something much more granular. I think quintiles is a reasonable level of granularity for something that aggregates like it does. But again, if you do this and you realize, hey, this has not been a best practice at our institution, please let me know. Drop me a comment. I'd love to improve this process. This is very much so, after having that conversation with Eric, has very much so been a vacuum chamber that I've built this in. So, again, trying to strike that balance of relatively quick and easy, large quotation marks around that, to spin up while being nuanced enough and detailed enough to produce a really valuable score at the end of it. And there's a lot of really interesting stuff we can do with quorum scoring beyond just travel planning. We are running out of time, so I need to maybe not pontificate quite so much and just get to work here. So we're going to look at percentile include, and let's just pop over here. And so we're just taking our group of prospects, like that volume count, and we are just going to pop back up here and get that percentile cutoff. So the kind of cutoff for that 20th percentile or first quartile is 4 prospects at the organization level. And we're just going to make sure that we anchor our rows. So when we do drag this formula down, we're not looking at like C6 to C866. But if you do update the data, just know that this formula is looking specifically at that range of data. And then let's also just anchor our quintile reference, or our percentile reference as well, because we're just going to be dragging this formula. So, and then our second quintile, or 40th percentile, is 5 prospects. So the larger prospect pool that you have, or inquiry pool, or applicant pool, admit pool, enrollment pool, gives you a better spread of these. So while you might want to score at these quintile levels, maybe it makes more sense to establish scoring bands that are a little bit off kilter from the quintiles, to better get an idea and be able to score these in a meaningful ways. But this is, I think, a very reasonable first step here. Oh, yeah, I guess probably not really having. Oh yeah, that is the average for our engagement score, which we're skipping. So our conversion rate, and again, this is just clean slate data, so it's just whatever they have in their system. So that first quintile conversion rate from prospect to inquiry is 67%. And let's see, the first quintile of the admit basically is just 25%. 80th percentile is 67%. So we're going to be able to start looking at these as our formula references to establish what quintile each of these are falling into. And I'm going to take a quick look at my formula real quick, just because it's a mess. There's 100% a better way to do it. I should have done that before. Again, if I were to rehearse this, I probably would have sat down and figured out a better formula for this. So basically a case when statement, if you're writing stuff in Slate formulas. So if C4, we said C5. So if C5 is less than and we're going to go ahead and lock that formula down. And we're going to say less than or equals 2. Then we're just going to assign that quintile level. And we're just going to copy this a few times and just manually update these references. So if this is 4, then we're going to call this 2. If this is 5, then it's the third quintile. And if that is 6, then we're just going to call that the fourth quintile. And if that is 7, we're going to call that the fifth quintile. And we're basically just giving them the number of points that... And each one of these needed an if statement behind it. And this is not going to be a percent. So we're just going to give that a number, take those decimal points off. Do that every single time. 20 years working in Excel. I do that every single time. So we're still looking at this very dynamically, so we can pull these formulas across. So if the number of admits, so this F5, we can see this in the formula, that's always our reference point, is less than or equal to, and then we're just passing this comparison through each of our quintiles. If it's equal to or less than any of these, then assign them the number of points of the quintile. So the higher, the better performing, quote unquote, what the organization is, or whatever umbrella data set you're using, the higher performing the school is, the more points based off of these quintiles that they're going to accrue. And we can continue to just pull this across. We do need, because these are if statements, the false is just going to pop up as none of these cases are true, which is a good error check. You could also just establish basically a null if, if null, just by adding another value there. We just say that's 1. I should have done that to begin with. That's just a 1 quintile because they're not, or we could just do 0 so they get 0 points rather than getting that first quintile. I don't think we need to overly penalize students based off the contextual information though. So I think it's fine just giving them a point for, unless you need the granularity, then you implement this however you need to. I'm just pontificating as I rebuild this from scratch. So, but maybe we want to weight this quorum score higher based off of conversion. So maybe someone who gets 1 quintile in the prospect to inquiry conversion, it's like, oh, okay, maybe that is 1 point, but maybe we care more so about, and this will probably be a little bit easier to, maybe we care more about that yield. So maybe we take that quintile score and we multiply it by 3. So we're weighting that score a little bit heavier. Or maybe we're just manually like, oh, we only care about if they're in that 5th quintile, then maybe give them 15 points. But if they're in a lower quintile, we don't care. We can give them their normal quintile strength on that score. So you have an incredible amount of flexibility with how you weight each of these individual contributing variables to your quorum score. Whether that's at the individual quintile level, at the individual column level. Maybe if they're a high yield, we really want to put the thumb on the score. But maybe if it's a high inquiry to app, we just want to, all those quintiles, we're just going to double. So a 2 quintile is 4 points, a 3rd quintile is 6 points, so on and so forth. And let's just add a column in here for a total. So like I said, we skipped our engagement piece, so we're just going to sum our quintiles here. And you can see Excel is like, hey, you have a different formula here, just make sure. So it's a different formula than what's to the left and then what's to the right. That's fine though, we purposely made that. So we have our total score here, but we want to look at specifically start building personas. And we can add additional information, maybe if you have information on schools, whether it's out of state, in-state, STEM focused high school, whatever it could be. You have a lot of information at the student level that goes to the organizations, and just maybe at the organization level. I recently had an interview with Sarah Kotlinski, who is doing a lot of, sounds like, I haven't seen the work yet, but she was talking about in that interview, doing a lot of really interesting contextual information at the organization level that I think would be wonderful. And when you're starting to look at organization or quorum personas, being able to have that context. And there's other vendor provided data, whether that's College Board with more or less vendor data coming from College Board every day. I'm not going to touch that though. ACS, that's already in Slate. And this is at the organization level, but it's also asterisk at the organization level. But you could also be doing this kind of work at the zip code level, at the geo-market level. You can do it at all those levels simultaneously. And again, give it a much richer contextual information, filling out that ecospherical data that you have on students based off of just the context that you already have in your Slate records. So what we're going to start looking at is just with this quorum data though, we've built this up in, what has this been, 40 minutes now? We've spun this up. And so maybe we want to look at individual pieces here. So if, and we want to do multiple if statements. So if and, so we're saying high volume, maybe we just do an average then. So an average of our volume, and this is across prospect, inquiry, app, admit, enrolled, all of those quintiles. If that average is greater than or equal to, we're saying 4, and the actual yield itself is low, so we're just going to look at just yield. Maybe that's equal to or less than a 2. Then we're just going to say that we are matching that persona. And if not, just a 0. And I just need to add my parentheses to close off my and statement. So anytime an organization, we can already see that we're having it here. So the average quintile for the volume is greater than or equals to a 4. And the yields that admit to enroll conversion is less than or equal to a 2. So we're identifying this persona, which is a high volume, low yield. And we're looking also at low volume, high conversion. So we're essentially just going to flip this. So maybe we're looking at, maybe we're looking more specifically at just low prospect volume. We could maybe acquire more names, do more travel in these organizations, whatever the strategy is to increase the volume of the funnel for these schools or these target markets, zip codes, whatever the quorum is associated with. So if that's less than 2 and the average of the conversion, and maybe we just care about prospect inquiry conversion and inquiry to application version. Maybe if that is greater than or equal to 3 even, and then we're going to do that 1, 0. And then we have a lot of those. So again, low prospect volume, but relatively high prospect to inquiry conversion and inquiry to application volume, conversion. So we're seeing a lot of mobility in the students that are at these schools. We need to get more students from that school into our funnel. And maybe that's more recruitment travel. Maybe that's more outreach to high school counselors, like saying, hey, students from your school do wonderful stuff here. They fit well with us. They're more likely to be admitted. They have great academic success. They go on to get great jobs. You can actually run featurettes on students from that school that it's not just like, hey, fluff, hey, send your students here. Like, hey, we're taking the time to show you just how amazing your students are that go here. Or maybe it's an automated email to those prospective students saying like, hey, our average admit rate is 12%. The average admit rate for students who go to your school is 25%. Whatever it is, you're communicating to the students at that school that they are a wonderful fit for your institution, even more so than the broader population. So being able to communicate that in a way, just because they have a Quorum persona, so you could automate your emails, or you could have a specific campaign that just looks for this organization persona. So in 45 minutes, we did our tarot read, our intro, and our training to build a Quorum Score. These could then be imported back into Slate fields at the organization level. So whenever you need it, just join from student to school rank 1 to organization, and then pull this data. You can also add this as entities to the organizations. So you can get that year over year. Where is your market shifting and getting ahead of trends, and also letting either. We'll save that for a second. So this will conclude the formal training portion of this. And I would say, just since Slate already has an organization data set, it's really easy to set up and build under that umbrella, because students who go to the same school might have a more similar experience than just students who possibly have the same zip code or geo market as that broader umbrella focal point for location. So doing a Quorum Score at the organization level, especially for your first Quorum Score, I think makes a lot of sense. You're not having to spin up data set for zip code or geo market as well. And you start to understand where your institution resonates with organizations. So you can start optimizing your own budget, your own time, your own staff in a way that is able to make the biggest impact on both student lives and, we'll call it what it is, ROI for recruitment travel. You're not just going to the string of schools because 5 years ago, a staff member had family nearby, so that's just the 5 schools they knew about, and they needed 5 more schools to hit their quota of schools that they needed to hit for recruitment travel. You're actually identifying either outperforming or large growth potential organizations for your institution, and you're targeting recruitment travel and relationship building. Like I said, having more fleshed out relationships with the counselors, or focusing and highlighting student success from organizations or types of schools that you can then disseminate back to those schools. And having student writing email communications. If you can only have 4, you only have time to pay 4 students to write emails, you have a better guidance of what students to get to hit these locales, because you have the data to back up your planning. And as you start seeing these underperforming schools and organizations, zip codes, geomarkets, you can actually start asking yourself questions that are sometimes uncomfortable. But like, what are we doing that's not resonating here at the school? What is not working? What are we doing that's not serving the students or the institution? And this isn't a call to just cut them and don't touch those schools. It's to start working on it. It's a call to action, really, for the institution to be more mindful with your activities based off of the data. As you see, you have an underperforming strategy with these high volume. You're buying tens of thousands of names, and they're just not converting. What is your buy strategy? What is your relationship building? Are you just buying them and assuming that they're going to come? Or are you actually reaching out to these students and these high school counselors and these CBOs in a way that builds a bridge for them to actually get to your institution? And the data piece is so helpful, and the automation piece is so helpful. There will be schools, especially more local ones, that your counselors have a feeling for. They have a gut instinct of what institutions have an ethos that plays well with your school, or we're connected in a way to the student body or the counseling staff that allows this to be a very strong feeder school for us. But there are so many schools across the country. We're not always going to have that institutional knowledge in the heads of people who are doing the recruitment. And that also puts such a huge burden on the staff to know these things, to remember these things, to understand the nuance of every single institution. especially with, as high as turnover is in admission offices, there's a lot more human work and human brain space that they could dedicate than knowing like, okay, yeah, these are the 75 schools in my territory that perform well. And we just kind of know they're a low volume, high conversion type of institution. Just with that institutional knowledge that accumulates through the repetitions that staff do. But now that they have this knowledge at their fingertips, they can build upon it. They can do more interesting work with these schools because they don't have some spreadsheet that they're manually maintaining because they remember they saw 7 students at this high school visit at the school. So unloading that burden off of the staff and into machines do this well. Humans do other work exceedingly well. And in a time where there is so much conversion to machines, being able to enrich the human experience is so incredibly important. And having this as a data source helps with the decision making, knowing where do we put our budget at, onboarding new staff, getting them up to speed in a way that a simple handoff conversation and that you may or may not have because hiring takes longer. Finding a qualified professional to step into the role that your former staff might have already left. So there are a few asterisks with a score like this. Schools that are close to you, schools that already receive a lot of recruitment travel in the area and to those institutions, college fairs, things like that, they're going to have an inflated quorum score. So you can create an adjusted quorum score by either like adding or subtracting points based off of distance or events in the area. Kind of like how we do bonuses with engagement scoring. You could run a regression, adjust by the residuals, and understanding that every student who goes to an organization is not the same student. This is just trying to help contextualize the student in a way that allows you to understand their student journey a little bit more. And this is one small puzzle piece in that larger ecospherical map of the student journey that we're going to be building in adaptive enrollment management. As we start building this, though, we can add this to the organization level. It's pretty easy and configurable joins, then pull that data. And like I said, recommend spin up an entity, get your year-over-year tracking. Probably is not going to wildly vary year to year, but you do start getting that year-over-year tracking that you can start seeing the shift take place, especially as we start to, I don't want to say plummet off the demographic cliff, but everything that I'm reading on that is, yes, there is a slowdown. There was a slowdown in births and immigration, migration. Those are all in flux in some parts of the country, in a sense of being a feeder location for schools is better or worse. And a lot of that is in flux just with recent climate. Again, just dancing around. Okay, we're going to move on. I'm not looking to get into that conversation. So as we start to wrap this up, I want to leave with a quote from our practitioner, Datamancer. True travel strategy is written not on paper, but in the currents of your data. And when you follow the currents, the path reveals itself. And this is just one brick on that path that allows you to start understanding students better and being able to implement what is very quickly dwindling resources in a way that is strategic and can make the largest impact for students and for your institution. For our runes of practice today, build a query in Slate to pull things like record volume, application conversion, engagement metrics around an umbrella data set. Like organizations we did today, you could also do this around zip codes, geomarkets. Those you would have to spin up a data set to have the scores and the personas actually related to those items that are on the student's record. And then calculate a quorum score in Excel that blends these elements into a single measure. And I would recommend adding the individual contributions to the score as well. You can run a dashboard that calculates these in real time. But again, if this is something that is slow or something that you want to look at in a broader context than just having to run those independent subqueries on the records at each of these schools, this is a great way to have that fast, quick, easy data already as a field, not having to live calculate it. And understanding, like, I wouldn't recommend running this every week. So if you are doing something that is a little bit more fine-tuned, like, okay, we have 7 students from this school this week, our goal is 15 students, and measuring progress, do that as an independent subquery and just run that total. But this is broader contextual and strategy work that I think can inform conversations around recruitment, whether that's travel, whether that's relationship building, whether that's marketing, communications, student features. And having this data in a quick query and a report, I think, is just helpful. This allows you to identify those schools, zips, geo markets, and aggregate that into quorum personas, quorum scores that can help guide where staff time yields the greatest impact for students and your institution. But it also allows you to start identifying similar schools that are still untapped. Maybe you have, again, even if it's institutional knowledge or just as you start to explore this data, like, hey, these schools are pretty similar. They do share a lot of similarities. They might perform better at our institution, kind of like this great high conversion school. If we spend a little time, again, maybe it's a couple student features, maybe it's a couple counselor calls, and being able to establish that pipeline that can replicate great success that we have. So you have these untapped markets and these untapped schools that this can help float to the surface, or at least add a little bit of a brushstroke and help you along that path to pilot some experiments with some of these organizations that seem like they might be untapped. And then workshop engagement with underperforming feeder schools to find a way that works. So as I said earlier, this isn't a way to just stop recruitment travel to underperforming schools. It's identifying which schools that what you're doing isn't working and working with them in a way that we can start bridging the student to institution pipeline in a way that is empowering to the student and impactful for the institution. And then use the score and personas to align travel schedules with demonstrated student behaviors, improving both efficiency and relevance. Again, if you're doing that 7th high school visit for the 7th year and there's just no one showing up, maybe a quorum score can help you understand, like, oh, okay, yeah, the schools around it resonate with our institutions. We can see this in the quorum score. We can see this in event attendance. There's just something happening at this school. Maybe it's a high school counselor that didn't like that you didn't admit one of their students, and maybe you just need to smooth that over. Or maybe it's students' emails, you didn't notice that they were blocking your event notifications. And again, you can start understanding those pieces in other ways, but this is just another data point to help you understand what is and isn't working in a way that just relying on overworked staff to take a minute, understand the context of which the success and failure is happening, and trying to troubleshoot it, that they just don't have time to do that for every single data element and every single piece of work that they do. And revisit the score each recruitment cycle to keep this model responsive to shifting markets. I would not recommend, I don't think there's any great value in doing it more frequently than once, maybe twice a year. Again, anything more frequent than that, I think you're looking at these individual data points like volume and conversion, and you could just be running that in Slate. I don't think it is helpful or going to actually make a final score difference to be running that more often. Guiding artifacts are, again, coming sample queries, suitcases, one-pagers. Let me know what's going to be helpful for you to replicate these processes at your institution. And discussion sparks. How would your current travel plan change if you centered recruitment discussions around quorum scores and personas instead of just historical habit? in which Quorum Personas reveal overlooked pockets of high conversion potential that you are missing, and what campus conversations are needed to act on these insights before the next recruitment season. I know we're already knee-deep in travel season, so this might be a next cycle conversation, but starting those conversations early to be able to pivot and already have this infrastructure in place for next season. And the Forge trial. In your own Slate instance, recreate the organization level query and export results. In Excel, calculate a quorum score and assign quintiles, identify at least 2 regions or schools where data suggests stronger recruiter presence is needed. And the foreshadow. Next time, we leave the open road and step into the quiet chamber of messagecraft, as the holograph prepares the words that move hearts. Today, you've added another page to your Forgeworks Grimoire. The tools you shaped here, both the technical and the strategy, are now yours to carry back to your own Forge. Take time to complete the Forge trial and record your reflections in your personal spellbook. Our cycle continues. When next we meet, a new practitioner will step from the shadows, and another piece of the enrollment craft will be revealed. Until then, may your work bridge the veil between the realms of data and understanding.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please grow the guild by rating and reviewing the Innovation Forge podcast, or sharing it with a colleague who needs to hear about these creative crossovers in education. The best review or comment every month will get an ebook of my book, of course. Particularly great ones will also be featured on future episodes. Thank you so much for joining me in the workshop today. Remember to strike true, and let's forge something extraordinary together.
The road is quiet, the stars align, numbers whisper, roots that shine. Every signal, every sign points to the heart we're meant to find. Let the data draw the map, let the wheels of insight turn. In the sparks of quorum's glow, we find the miles we yearn. Schools and cities call our name, patterns hum a steady frame. Steps we take are more than chance, this is the Datamancer's dance. Currents of connection guide the way. Our travel finds the future, we will sway. Let the data draw the map, let the wheels of insight turn. Through the forge of measured truth, we reach the hearts that burn.